There's something deeply misunderstood about silence. People often mistake it for weakness. They think if you're not the loudest voice in the room, you must have nothing to say. If you're not constantly asserting your presence, you must not have one worth noticing. But the truth is, silence is one of the most powerful tools we have. It doesn't scream for attention. It commands it without a word. And that kind of power, the quiet kind, is rare. When you walk into a room and don't feel the need to talk just to fill the space, that's strength. When you hear something you disagree with, and your first instinct isn't to argue but to listen, to really listen, that's restraint and that's control. Silence gives us room to observe, to understand, and to prepare. It allows us to process before we react. And in a world that's constantly urging us to respond immediately, that ability to pause and choose your moment, that's a skill most people don't have. Let's be honest. We live in a time where everyone is performing. Social media has turned life into a stage. Everyone wants to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. The moment something happens, there's pressure to comment on it, to have a take, to put your opinion out into the world as fast as possible. But what if your power isn't in reacting? What if it's in waiting? What if it's in choosing to hold back until what you say actually matters? The person who's always talking might seem like the one in control, but often they're just the loudest in the room, not the smartest, not the most composed, just loud. And loud doesn't equal leadership. Loud doesn't mean clarity. Loud sometimes is just noise. The person who's quiet, the one who speaks only when they have something meaningful to contribute, that's the one people start to listen to. Because when they speak, it's not just to be heard, it's to add something. Their words carry weight because they've earned that weight through presence, not volume. Silence creates space. It creates the space to reflect, to notice what others miss, to tune into what's really going on, not just on the surface, but underneath. When you're silent, you're not disengaged. You're engaged differently. You're watching body language. You're picking up patterns. You're noticing who's aligned with what values and who's just talking to hear themselves talk. And when you speak from that place of awareness, it resonates. It cuts through. It's the difference between speaking out of impulse and speaking out of intention. There's another part of this that's really important, self-trust. Silence is also a reflection of how much you trust yourself. People who don't trust their own value tend to over-explain, overshare, overcompensate. They feel the need to fill silence because they're uncomfortable with it. They're afraid that if they don't say something, they'll be forgotten, ignored, dismissed. But the people who have done the work on themselves, the people who have looked in the mirror and faced what's there, who know what they bring to the table, they're not threatened by quiet. They don't need constant reassurance. They can walk into a room, sit down, say little, and still be felt. That kind of energy doesn't come from being better than anyone else. It comes from being deeply grounded in yourself. From knowing that what you think, what you feel, what you choose, those things don't need to be validated externally to matter. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. You just need to live it. And here's something else. Silence protects your energy. Every time you speak, you give a piece of yourself away. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're always giving, always explaining, defending, performing, you end up exhausted, stretched thin, disconnected from yourself. Silence helps you conserve. It keeps you from leaking energy into things that don't serve you. It helps you remain selective about where you place your focus, because not everything deserves your attention. Not every fight is yours to fight. Not every opinion is yours to challenge. Silence teaches you that. It helps you choose when to act and when to let things pass. And that choice, that discipline, is what separates people who react from people who lead. We've been taught that to be noticed, we have to be loud. But the truth is, when you focus on yourself, when you're doing the real work, the quiet work, the kind of work that doesn't always look impressive on the surface, people notice. Maybe not right away, but they do. They see the difference in how you carry yourself, in how you move through the world. You start to become the kind of person who doesn't have to raise their voice to be heard. Your presence speaks for itself. Your silence becomes a statement, not of withdrawal, but of intention. So many of us feel like we have to prove ourselves all the time. We feel like we're falling behind if we're not constantly making noise about our progress. But that's not how real growth happens. Real growth happens in the quiet moments, when no one's watching, when you're just doing the work, building the foundation brick by brick. That kind of growth is solid. It lasts. And when you emerge from that silence, when you finally do speak or act, people listen because they know it comes from depth, from clarity, from purpose. There's a reason the most impactful people are often the most composed. It's not that they don't feel things, it's that they've trained themselves not to be ruled by emotion. They've learned to be still, to observe, to respond with precision. That's what silence does. It gives you time to access your higher self before making a move. And in that stillness, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Not because you're plotting or pretending, but because you're aware, because you're intentional. Because your silence isn't emptiness, it's preparation. So, the next time you feel the urge to react, to speak up just to fill the space, ask yourself, what would happen if I didn't? What would I learn if I stayed silent a little longer? What would I notice if I focused inward instead of outward? Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. Let your silence shape your strength. We don't often think about energy the way we should. Not in the way it truly matters. But the truth is, energy is currency. And every time you spend it on a thought, on a conversation, on a reaction, you're making an investment. The question is, are you investing in yourself, or are you leaking that energy into places that give you nothing in return? Think about how much of your time is consumed by what other people are doing. How much energy goes into watching, scrolling, comparing, worrying, arguing. How often do we catch ourselves thinking about how someone else is living their life instead of focusing on what we're building with our own? It's almost automatic. You open your phone and within seconds you're pulled into a world where everyone seems to be doing more, having more, being more. And suddenly your own path feels small, slow, maybe even invisible. But here's the problem. When you give too much of your energy to others, especially through comparison or validation seeking, you start to abandon yourself. You're no longer centered. You're not growing. You're reacting. And the more time you spend reacting to the world around you, the less time you have to create something meaningful within you. It's not that other people don't matter. It's that your energy is sacred. Your attention is limited. And you can't afford to waste it on things that don't serve your growth, your peace, your purpose. Every moment you spend proving something to someone who isn't even thinking about you, that's energy you could have spent on yourself. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't about becoming selfish or shutting the world out. It's about alignment. It's about learning how to be protective of your space, your time, and your focus. Because when you stop trying to impress everyone else, you start to impress yourself. And that shift, that internal shift, is where real transformation begins. We've all been there, trying to keep up, trying to be seen, trying to show that we're doing okay. But the truth is, most people aren't really paying that much attention. They're too busy dealing with their own insecurities, their own doubts. So while you're overextending yourself to be noticed, the people you're trying to impress aren't even watching. That's not because you're invisible. It's because everyone's too caught up in their own world to care as much as you think they do. And if you're going to exhaust yourself, if you're going to spend that energy, shouldn't it be for something that actually moves your life forward? When you start focusing inward, when you turn your attention to your own habits, your own healing, your own path, something shifts. You begin to feel stronger, calmer, more centered. You stop measuring your worth by other people's standards. And suddenly, their opinions don't hold the same weight. Not because you're arrogant, but because you've built something inside of you that doesn't depend on external approval. That's the gift of focus. It simplifies your life. It frees you from the noise. It brings clarity to your goals and quiet to your mind. Because when your energy isn't scattered, you move differently. You speak with more conviction. You act with more purpose. You don't have to second guess yourself because your decisions aren't coming from a place of fear or competition. They're coming from alignment. It's easy to get distracted. We all do. But distractions are expensive. Every time you take your eyes off your own path to check someone else's progress, you delay your own. Every time you worry about what someone else thinks of you, you give them control over your peace. And every time you act out of comparison, you compromise your authenticity. So how do you shift that? You start by being honest with yourself. Where is your energy going? Who or what gets the majority of your mental space? And are those places worthy of that kind of investment? Because that's what it is, an investment. Your time, your thoughts, your emotions, they're resources. And if you keep giving them away to things that drain you, you'll wake up one day empty. Not because you weren't capable, but because you weren't intentional. This is why silence matters. This is why focus matters. They're tools that allow you to come back to yourself. They help you remember what actually matters, what you're building, who you want to become. And once you reconnect with that, everything else becomes background noise. You don't need to respond to every comment. You don't need to prove your success. You don't need to chase validation. Because the truth is, people will see what they want to see. No amount of explanation can change that. But when your life speaks for itself, When your results speak louder than your words, you don't have to convince anyone of anything. That's the kind of power that comes from focusing on yourself, quietly, consistently, without needing to broadcast every step. It's not glamorous, it's not always exciting, but it's real and it's sustainable. Because you're not building for attention, you're building for endurance, for truth, for legacy. And let's be honest, some people won't understand your silence. They'll interpret it as distance or arrogance or indifference. Let them. You're not here to manage other people's perceptions. You're here to grow. And sometimes that growth requires you to pull back from the noise and tune into your own rhythm. Protect your energy. Stop explaining yourself. Start building. Quietly, intentionally, fully. Because when you finally arrive, when you reach that next level, it won't be because you shouted the loudest. It'll be because you did the work, even when no one was watching. The less you chase people, the more you attract what's aligned. There's a common myth that to be successful, you need to constantly seek validation from others. We're taught from a young age that approval, recognition, and acknowledgement are what confirm our worth. The more people who recognize our accomplishments, the more value we must have, right? But here's the truth. The moment you stop looking for validation from the outside world is the moment you truly begin to build confidence from within. It's a quiet shift, one that happens not with a loud announcement, but with a deep inner realization. You begin to realize that your worth, your value, your potential are not determined by what others think of you. They never were. You don't need external affirmation to validate your efforts, your skills, or your vision. Because the truth is, when you start focusing on yourself and your own growth, you stop relying on other people's opinions to fuel your sense of purpose. And in that shift, you find clarity. Self-focus is about tuning into your own thoughts, desires, and goals, not letting them be drowned out by the noise of what's going on around you. When you stop measuring your progress based on how others are doing or how others perceive you, you can begin to measure your own success through your own lens. It's no longer about competing with anyone else. It's about competing with yourself. Who were you yesterday and who can you become today? That's the true measure of success. And it's not just about results. It's about understanding the process. When you turn your focus inward, you develop a relationship with yourself. You become your own coach, your own guide. You learn to listen to what you need. You start trusting yourself in a way that no one else can validate for you. And in that trust, you discover a sense of confidence that's grounded not in external accolades, but in a deep sense of self-awareness. This is where real growth happens. It happens when you stop rushing to meet someone else's timeline. Stop trying to keep up with someone else's definition of success. You begin to define your own path. And what that does is give you the space to evolve in a way that's unique to you. It's no longer about mimicking someone else's journey or measuring your life against someone else's achievements. It's about doing the work that aligns with your own values, your own ambitions, and your own sense of purpose. Focusing on yourself means that you're not distracted by every new trend, every new voice, or every new external challenge. Instead, you stay in your lane, concentrating on what's in front of you, one step at a time. That's where you find real clarity. You start building a life that's in harmony with who you truly are, not a life that's built on imitation or comparison. And this is the key to confidence. Confidence is not something that's handed to you. It's something you cultivate within yourself. It's earned through discipline, through reflection, and through a commitment to your own personal development. Here's the thing. When you focus on yourself, you stop seeking validation. And when you stop seeking validation, you start to feel secure in who you are. You stop looking for someone else to tell you that you're good enough, that you're doing the right thing, that your ideas have value. You stop needing the external world to confirm your self-worth. And instead, you learn to rely on your own belief in yourself. That's where your true confidence begins. It's important to understand that confidence isn't arrogance. It's not about being better than anyone else. It's about knowing your own value without needing anyone else to validate it. It's about owning your strengths, acknowledging your weaknesses, and having the courage to keep improving. The moment you stop seeking validation from the world around you, you free yourself to show up fully as who you are without apology. You stop measuring yourself against others, and instead you measure yourself against who you were yesterday and who you are becoming. When you focus on yourself, you start to notice something beautiful happens. You start to appreciate the progress you're making, even the small steps. And that appreciation fuels your growth even further. It's not about waiting for the world to applaud you. It's about looking inward and acknowledging that every step you take is a victory in its own right. This is where real self-confidence comes from, appreciating the journey for what it is, not waiting for a grand moment of recognition. It's easy to get caught up in the need for praise, especially when it feels like everyone else is getting it. But the truth is, recognition from others is often fleeting. People forget. They move on to the next big thing. And if your confidence is based on the approval of others, you'll find yourself in a constant state of trying to prove your worth. But when you learn to find satisfaction in your own progress, you create an unshakable foundation. Your confidence becomes rooted in something far deeper than the temporary highs of external approval. Self-focus allows you to stop outsourcing your self-worth. It empowers you to define what success looks like on your terms, to build confidence on your own timeline, and to be at peace with the person you are, regardless of how others perceive you. You stop measuring your worth by how many likes you get or how many people validate your opinions. You start measuring it by how you show up for yourself every day, by how much you trust your instincts, how much you grow, how much you push past fear, and how much you invest in your own well-being. This is not an overnight change. It's a shift that takes time, that takes practice. But the more you focus on yourself, the more you realize how much you already have within you. And that's when true confidence takes root. Confidence doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the courage to show up, to keep going, and to stay aligned with who you are and where you're headed. So stop looking for approval. Stop waiting for someone else to tell you that you're doing it right. Look inside. Ask yourself if you're doing what you need to do to grow, to evolve, to become the best version of yourself. That's the only validation that truly matters. Because when you focus on yourself, you stop searching for someone else's approval. And you start realizing you never needed it in the first place. You've always had everything you need within you. You just needed to see it. When you focus on yourself, you'll see just how much you're capable of. And in that realization, you'll find a confidence that no one can take away. Real growth is a private process. It's something that happens when no one's watching. It's the work you do when you're alone with your thoughts, your goals, your struggles. It's not always glamorous. It's not the kind of growth that gets immediate applause or recognition. In fact, most of the time, the deepest changes happen quietly. They happen when you're willing to face the parts of yourself that need work and make the decision to put in the effort, even when no one else sees it. When you focus on your personal growth in private, you're building something that is authentic, something that's built to last. This is where the real work happens. You're not focused on instant results or accolades, and you're not doing it for the approval of others. It's a commitment to yourself, a decision to become the best version of who you are without waiting for external validation. Most of the time, people don't see the struggles, the late nights, the early mornings, or the moments when you're wrestling with your doubts. They don't see the quiet decisions you make every day to keep going, even when you don't feel like it. They don't see you falling and getting back up, or the times when you've had to make sacrifices that no one knows about. And that's the point. Growth, true growth, doesn't always require an audience. The journey to becoming who you're meant to be isn't something you can perform for others. It's something you do for yourself. And in this private space where you're doing the hard, often unseen work, you start to understand something powerful. You start to understand that growth isn't just about the outcome. It's about the process. It's about the choices you make in the quiet moments. It's about how you show up for yourself day after day, even when the world isn't watching. When you build in private, you're building with integrity. You're building with depth. And that depth is what will sustain you in the long run. When you're constantly seeking validation, it's easy to get distracted by what others think of you, by how they measure your progress, by how quickly they think you should be, achieving your goals. But the truth is, progress isn't a race. It doesn't happen on someone else's timeline. And when you're focused on private growth, you're not concerned with competing against anyone else. You're only concerned with improving yourself. You're only concerned with making small, consistent changes that move you closer to where you want to be. The best part about growth in private is that it's free from the noise of other people's expectations. You don't have to worry about how it looks from the outside. You don't have to worry about whether others are keeping track of your progress or not. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. All you need to do is show up for yourself and keep putting in the work. Real growth also requires a level of patience that's often hard to embrace in a world that values instant results. But the most meaningful changes are rarely instantaneous. They're built over time. They're cultivated through consistent effort, through self-discipline, and through the courage to keep going when it feels like you're not making progress at all. But that's the nature of private growth. It doesn't need instant feedback. It doesn't need immediate rewards. It trusts the process. As you keep showing up, as you keep doing the work, you'll start to notice something. The changes you're making become visible, even if no one else can see them at first. You start to feel more grounded, more confident, and more aligned with who you are. And eventually, when you're ready, others will begin to notice too. But at that point, it won't matter as much. You'll know that the growth you've experienced is real and sustainable because it's been built from the inside out. This is the difference between external success and internal growth. External success often comes with praise and recognition, but it can also be fleeting. People celebrate you when things are going well, but if you're only focused on external validation, you can find yourself on a constant treadmill of seeking approval. True growth, the kind that lasts, is grounded in your own internal drive and commitment. It doesn't rely on the applause of others. It doesn't need to be seen or acknowledged right away. It's the kind of growth that speaks for itself when the time is right. And this is where silence plays a crucial role. Silence isn't about retreating from the world. It's about creating space for reflection, for deep work, for personal evolution. It's about trusting that the progress you're making is real, even when no one else can see it. It's about knowing that the effort you're putting in today will pay off in ways you can't always predict or measure. And in the meantime, you're doing the hard work in private, in silence, with the understanding that this is where your true power is being built. In a world that values visibility, it can be hard to resist the urge to share every step of your journey, to look for external feedback, to let others in on what you're doing. But the most powerful growth happens when you're not focused on anyone else's opinions. It happens when you're not worried about how things appear on the surface. It happens when you're focused solely on doing the work and becoming the best version of yourself, whether anyone notices or not. The most successful people, the ones who make the greatest impact, are often the ones who do their best work quietly. They focus on their craft, they focus on their purpose, and they keep improving, even when no one is watching. They understand that the process is just as important as the result. They understand that growth doesn't always come with immediate applause, but that it's the slow, steady work that leads to lasting change. So focus on your growth in private. Don't worry about what others think. Don't wait for validation. Do the work because you believe in the process, because you trust that the time you're investing in yourself will pay off in ways that matter to you. And when you look back, you'll realize that the most important growth you experienced happened in those quiet, private moments when no one was watching and no one was waiting for you to succeed. Because true growth is something you build in silence, in private, for yourself. It's not about performing for an audience. It's about becoming who you're meant to be, with or without anyone's approval. And that's where real strength lies. It's easy to fall into the trap of trying to manage everyone else's perception of you. The constant pressure to fit into societal molds, to meet external expectations, to live up to what others believe your life should look like. It can be overwhelming. But what happens when you stop trying to impress anyone? What happens when you let go of the constant need to prove yourself? You find freedom. Freedom in being yourself, in living for your own satisfaction and not for the approval of others. Imagine waking up every morning and not feeling the weight of judgment, not caring about what people think of your choices, your actions, or your dreams. What would it feel like to go through your day knowing that your value doesn't depend on anyone else's opinions? The truth is, that's when you begin to live authentically. You start living with intention, in alignment with who you are, not who others want you to be. When you let go of the need for validation, something incredible happens. You stop looking for permission. You stop waiting for someone to tell you that you're on the right track, that you're good enough, that your ideas are worthy of being heard. You begin to trust yourself, to listen to your instincts, and to make decisions based on your own internal compass rather than the external noise. And in that space of trust, your power grows. Here's the thing. When you stop seeking approval, you stop seeking outside influence over your choices. Instead of looking for validation, you begin to find it within yourself. And the more you do this, the more you realize that your worth isn't contingent on the judgments of others. You start to recognize that the only opinion that truly matters is your own. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with your decisions, your actions, and your life. Now, that doesn't mean you abandon relationships or stop caring about the people around you. It doesn't mean you stop seeking feedback or constructive criticism. But it does mean that you stop living for the approval of others. You stop measuring your success by how many likes, comments, or compliments you receive. You stop measuring your worth by external achievements and begin to define your success based on your own terms. Living for yourself rather than for others is one of the most freeing experiences you can have. It allows you to start living authentically, to start creating a life that reflects who you truly are, not who society expects you to be. You stop pretending to be someone you're not, stop acting a certain way to fit in, and start embracing the real you. And when you do this, you'll be surprised at how much more peace and confidence you gain in the process. One of the most powerful realizations comes when you finally understand that other people's judgments are often a reflection of their own fears and insecurities, not a reflection of you. People judge because they're struggling with their own challenges, their own issues. When you stop internalizing those judgments, you realize that they have no power over you unless you give them that power. You don't need to let someone else's perception of you dictate how you feel about yourself. And when you stop seeking validation, you stop giving away your power. You stop letting others control your emotions, your decisions, and your peace. You take your power back. The truth is, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And when you stop seeking validation from others, you take full responsibility for your own emotions and your own sense of worth. This is where real empowerment comes from. Imagine for a moment how much mental energy is spent worrying about what others think of you, the anxiety of wanting to impress, of fearing judgment, of wondering if you're enough. It takes so much energy. And the reality is, people rarely think about you as much as you think they do. Most of the time, they're caught up in their own lives, their own concerns. So why should you let their opinions shape your world? Why should you give so much of your precious energy to something that doesn't matter as much as your own peace? When you stop seeking validation, you free up mental space. You create room for creativity, for clarity, for growth. You stop overthinking every decision you make, wondering if it's the right one, if it's the one that will be accepted. Instead, you begin to trust yourself. You make decisions with confidence, knowing that your choices are based on your values, your goals, and your own truth. That's what true confidence feels like. The ability to make decisions without needing someone else's approval, without fearing rejection or criticism. And in that freedom, you can build something real. You can create a life that reflects your true self, without worrying about whether it fits into someone else's idea of success or happiness. You begin to embrace your individuality, and you stop trying to live up to a standard that was never meant for you. You stop measuring your worth by comparison, and you start measuring it by your own growth, your own progress, and your own fulfillment. This is where the magic happens. When you let go of the need to prove yourself, you give yourself permission to thrive. You give yourself permission to make mistakes, to try new things, to fail and get back up. You stop worrying about what others will think of your journey, and you start focusing on the joy of the process itself. This is where true personal growth occurs. Not when you're trying to meet other people's expectations, but when you're fully committed to your own path. The world will try to tell you who you should be. It will tell you what success looks like, what happiness should feel like, what your life should look like at every stage. But none of that matters unless it aligns with who you truly are. The only voice that truly matters is your own. When you stop seeking validation from others, you give yourself the opportunity to listen to that voice more clearly. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop asking for permission. You trust yourself, your journey, and your process. And as you continue on this path, you'll find that not only are you more at peace with yourself, but you also become more resilient. You stop being shaken by the opinions of others. The opinions of others become background noise, and your own inner voice becomes your guide. This is where your true strength lies, in trusting yourself and your journey, regardless of what anyone else thinks. When you let go of the need for validation, you find the freedom to live your life on your terms. You stop living for others, and you start living for yourself. And in that freedom, you become unstoppable. Because the most powerful thing you can do is to be yourself unapologetically, without seeking approval or permission from anyone. That's when you start to live a life that's truly yours. When you embrace the power of silence, you start to realize how much you've been missing by constantly chasing the noise. The noise of expectations, the noise of comparison, the noise of constant external stimulation. It's easy to get lost in it all. We've been conditioned to believe that noise is necessary, that if we aren't constantly speaking, constantly doing, constantly pushing, we're not succeeding. But the truth is, silence holds a power that is often overlooked. It is in the quiet, still moments that clarity, purpose, and true growth emerge. We live in a world that celebrates busyness. The more we do, the more we achieve, the more visible we are, the more we are valued. But the question is that really true? Is it really in our constant action, our constant striving, our constant doing that we find success? Or is it in the moments of pause, the moments of reflection, where we can listen to ourselves, to our inner voice, and connect to our deeper purpose? Silence is often misunderstood. It's not the absence of noise, it's the presence of thoughtfulness. It's the space where we give ourselves the freedom to reflect, to reset, and to reconnect with who we truly are. When you stop filling every moment with activity or sound, you open the door to deeper understanding. You give yourself the time and the space to really think about where you're going, why you're going there, and whether it aligns with the person you want to be. In silence, you gain clarity. It's so easy to get caught up in the constant buzz of life, to let the world around you dictate your direction. But when you embrace silence, you begin to tune out the noise and focus on your own thoughts and instincts. You stop seeking answers from the outside world and start finding them within. You become more self-aware, more connected to your own desires and values. And in that self-awareness, you find the guidance you need to make the decisions that will move you forward. Another powerful aspect of silence is that it allows you to truly listen. We're surrounded by so many voices, our friends, family, colleagues, social media influencers, celebrities. Everyone has something to say. But how often do we actually take the time to listen? I mean, really listen to ourselves, to our thoughts, to our feelings. It's in silence that we can hear what our heart truly wants, what our mind is trying to tell us, what our gut is urging us to do. And when you listen deeply to yourself, you stop second-guessing your decisions. You start trusting your instincts, knowing that your inner voice is one of your greatest sources of wisdom. The beauty of silence is that it provides an opportunity for growth without distraction. In the absence of constant noise, we can fully embrace our potential. We are often too busy reacting to what's going on around us to actually take a step back and think about what we want, what we need, and what we're capable of achieving. The quiet moments allow us to do just that. In silence, we find the freedom to explore, to create, and to dream without limits. It's in these moments of stillness that we are able to dive deep into our own thoughts and aspirations, uncovering new possibilities and insights that we may have otherwise missed. One of the most liberating things about silence is the freedom it offers from comparison. We live in a world where comparison is rampant, where we're constantly measuring ourselves against others. We scroll through social media and see the achievements of others, the lives they lead, the successes they've had, and we begin to wonder, am I doing enough? Am I enough? The noise of comparison can drown out our sense of self, leading us to feel like we are falling behind or missing out. But when we embrace silence, we create space to disconnect from that noise. We no longer need to measure our worth against anyone else's. We start to focus on our own progress, our own journey, and realize that it's not about competing with others. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves. Silence also helps us cultivate patience, something that is in short supply in today's fast-paced world. We live in a world that demands instant gratification. We want answers now, results now, success now. But the truth is, meaningful change takes time. It's in silence that we can learn to slow down, to trust the process, and to appreciate the value of patience. When we stop rushing through life and give ourselves permission to be still, we begin to understand that everything has its own timing. We don't need to chase after results. We just need to keep putting in the work day by day, knowing that everything will unfold in its own time. In the silence, we also create room for true connection. In a world where everyone is constantly talking, shouting, and projecting their voices, it's easy to forget how powerful listening can be. Silence allows us to be present with the people in our lives, to truly listen to them without distraction, and to connect on a deeper level. When we stop filling every conversation with our own thoughts and opinions, we create space for others to express themselves. And in that space, we build trust, understanding, and compassion. Perhaps one of the most profound aspects of embracing silence is the opportunity it gives us to recharge. We live in a culture that values constant productivity, where being busy is equated with being valuable. But we all know that when we push ourselves too hard, we burn out. In silence, we find the rest we need to recharge our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing what's necessary to refuel and rejuvenate so we can continue to move forward with energy and focus. As we embrace silence, we also begin to embrace our own uniqueness. Silence allows us to step away from the noise of the world and listen to our own inner wisdom. It helps us clarify who we are, what we want, and where we're headed. It's only in the quiet moments that we can truly hear ourselves. And when we do, we begin to understand that we don't need to conform to anyone else's expectations. We can define our own path, and we can trust ourselves to walk it with confidence. So, in a world that seems to be constantly pulling us in every direction, We have to make a conscious choice to embrace the power of silence. We have to create space for ourselves, to tune out the distractions, and to listen to what really matters. Because in that silence, we will find the clarity, the focus, and the peace we need to move forward with purpose and strength. Silence isn't a void. It's a powerful force that can guide us to the life we're meant to live. And sometimes, the most powerful action we can take is to simply be still and listen.